Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. It's nice to be before you today after the inaugural meeting of the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting that we have been working on for several months, if not even before the Delta Plan was adopted. As you may recall, there is a Water Code section 85204 that is located in the Delta Reform Act to establish this committee. And in accordance with that law and through the direction of the council chairman, Mr. Fiorini, the inaugural meeting of this committee commenced on Wednesday, April 9th, a couple of weeks ago. The meeting was very well attended by agency heads and their key staff and Delta stakeholders. It was standing room only. That may be partly because the room was rather small, but all the same, it was very well attended. And in addition, there were a couple hundred viewers online for the live webcast, which also notes the importance of a grouping, this particular grouping of high-level members. Just to refresh your memory, the council adopted a core membership for this committee. And so those in attendance, it was very well attended. It was attended by all of the core members with the exception of the Department of Interior. Deputy Secretary Mike Connor personally expressed his regrets for not being able to attend in person. He then put all of his authority within the hands of Regional Director David Murillo with the Bureau of Reclamation, who was there on his behalf, as well as being there on behalf of the Bureau. Secretary Laird was there on behalf of the Natural Resources Agency. Gordon Burns, the Undersecretary for Cali, PA, was present in place of Secretary Rodriguez, who unfortunately had fell ill that morning. Secretary Karen Ross was in attendance on behalf of California Department of Food and Agriculture. We, of course, had Dr. Peter Goodwin there on behalf of the Delta Science Program, and, of course, the chairman of the committee and the chairman of the council, Mr. Fiorini. Mary Pifo, the vice chair of the Delta Protection Commission, was there, and Mark Cowan, director of Department of Water Resources, as well. Chuck Bonham with Department of Fish and Wildlife was present and accounted for and very engaged, and Felicia Marcus, the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board, was also there. Campbell Ingram represented the Delta Conservancy, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy, and Bill Edgar, the president of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, made up the grouping of state and Delta agencies on the committee. The federal agencies were very, very well represented, and I'd like to make a special acknowledgement to that as the federal partnership, our efforts to maintain and increase and strengthen the federal partnership with select agencies working in the Delta make this a much more comprehensive effort. And knowing how busy, of course, both state and federal agencies were, it was commendable to have their presence there. Most notably, David Murillo, as I mentioned, with the Bureau of Reclamation. Deanne Castleberry, the Assistant Regional Director for the Pacific Southwest Division of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, was there on behalf of Ren Lohefner, who had a scheduling conflict. Maria Ray, the Assistant Regional Administrator for the Central Valley Office of the NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service, was there for most of the meeting. And then Will Stell, her boss, the Regional Director, was able to fly in from Seattle and actively participate in the majority of the meeting. And Jared Blumenfeld, the Regional Administrator with the Pacific Southwest region of US EPA, was present and very active, and we greatly appreciate that. And Clark Frenson, who's the Chief Planning and Policy Director for the South Pacific Division of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So that made up the group of representatives, high-level representatives, to participate in this inaugural meeting. We also had some presenters as well as part of the agenda, and I would like to make a particular note to those presenters, particularly Joseph Byrne, the chairman of the California Water Commission, who spoke on their water storage survey. I'll elaborate on that here. Also like to recognize Dr. Peter Goodwin, who spoke on science, Campbell Ingram, who spoke on behalf of Delta Restoration, and hopefully I'm not forgetting anyone. Oh, and Dan Ray, Chief Deputy Director Dan Ray, thank you, I knew that would happen, who spoke very, very comprehensively and concisely on the Delta Plan and also our levee investment strategy. So thank you, Randy. So with that, let me explain that the council may remember they provided a charge to this committee, and just for the sake of reminding all, it was to serve as a forum to discuss and consider and orchestrate the timely and orderly implementation of actions consistent with policies and recommendations outlined in the Delta Plan. It was also essential to undertake efforts to maximize government efficiency, provide leadership, accountability, and highlight where agency alignment will have the greatest impact. What was very important to recognize for a meeting, not only with the caliber of attendees, but for the time that it takes to have to touch on all of the important points, is it was a 3.5-hour meeting scheduled for the morning of the 9th, and the drought, of course, was going on at the same time. There were plenty of other things to occupy the time of these agencies, which already, of course, as we know, are short-staffed and trying to meet all of their demands. So what we wanted to do is that as the demands of the drought had required daily interagency meetings to improve coordination to best handle this crisis, the implementation committee meeting was crafted, in fact, to amplify that cooperation and build on it for the purposes of the long-term health of the Delta. Therefore, the agenda was designed to foster and generate some solid discussion. First, we wanted to showcase the common themes of the 3 major state and federal plans, which prominently address Delta issues, and to increase the agency alignment. Particularly the California Water Action Plan. Secretary Laird spoke to that. Just to highlight was that he identified that there is no silver bullet or single project that can address all of California's challenges within water management and within restoration. So it was very valuable for the state to come up with a 1 to 5 year near-term action plan. And that within that is a large component of Delta projects. That was why we wanted to bring that to the forefront. Also, then there's a federal investments plan for the Bay Delta region that was provided through the federal agencies, and David Murillo spoke to that. And an important point that he made was that the federal agencies wanted to have recognized that there's more than just one solution to their activities within the Delta. And so outside of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, they wanted to showcase that the federal agencies are dedicated to many, many aspects to improving Delta conditions. Secondly, well, if I may, actually, all 3 plans support the Delta through near and longer term plan actions. Particular attention was given to how best to coordinate the implementation and the work of these plans, recognizing the shared goals and how to better work together to achieve progress in the near term while keeping their eye on the longer vision. Secondly, the agenda was dedicated to highlighting the cooperative relations that have intensified and strengthened through specific projects and that are now underway that touch on water supply reliability, ecosystem restoration, and the Delta as an evolving place. So that is where our presentations came in. Again, Chair of the California Water Commission, Joe Byrne, flew up from LA that morning just to make the presentation on their surface and groundwater storage survey. That actually the council today will be getting their own presentation on that, so I won't overly describe that. However, it was important to showcase that there are already existing interagency efforts underway, particularly looking at water supply reliability through storage opportunities, both in groundwater and surface water. As well, we had the Delta Restoration Network discussion. That was a presentation by Campbell Ingram, and he elaborated on the multi-agency cooperation and effort that's underway to create a hub of restoration activities for the Delta. The Conservancy has been working very closely with our Delta Science program as well, but many agencies are involved in this. And this is the beginning of a greater effort, but it was important to showcase such a program with this high-level group of agency heads. As well, we had a discussion again by Dan Ray on our multi-agency levy investment strategy that's being spearheaded by the Council in close cooperation with the Department of Water Resources and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, among others. The reason why we chose these is they are representing not only the co-equal goals through these actions and these efforts, but it's our way of showing that implementation is taking many different forms, not just directly related to the Delta Plan, but through many different activities. Third, we wanted to emphasize the Delta Science program because with all 16 agencies represented at this committee meeting, the one issue that brought everyone together, that bound every single agency head there, was science in the Delta. And Dr. Peter Goodwin did an excellent job on creating a very concise and comprehensive overview of our science program, of its focus on different data and monitoring programs and the different efforts that they are undertaking, particularly through the Interim Science Action Agenda. I know we'll be learning a little bit more about an upcoming meeting that's on May 6th, but the way that this was presented to the committee was that the Interim Science Action Agenda is intended to incorporate the feedback and input of all these different agencies. So this was an opportunity to highlight that for those agency heads that were present and make them aware that we are looking to engage them for furthering a near-term science action agenda. It was imperative for us to hold this high-level policy discussion, particularly on what implementation of the Delta Plan and the state and federal plans means through the lens of the Delta's future. It was significant to showcase how the Delta Plan complements the efforts of the state and federal administrations, and that through the role of the Council implementing the Delta Plan, we are, by the very nature of that effort, implementing the Delta portions of those related state and federal plans, and vice versa. This was a critical point to the meeting. And this just emphasized what the Council has been noting all along, that coordination is critical to success, and all of those agencies that were present because they also believed that as well. So they were showing by their attendance in this, their active engagement on that and the importance of that. So for the inaugural meeting, the main objective was for all agencies to mutually determine greatest need and best approaches to increase alignment for plan implementation through this committee venue. There was considerable engagement on the part of the committee participants on all agenda items, particularly around the significant role of collaborative science as supported by the Delta Science program. If I may, one notable comment by Will Stell with National Marine Fisheries was he was looking at the charge and the objectives that the Council had provided to the committee, and he focused on number 3, which says to identify opportunities for integration and leveraging of funding among state and federal agencies. And he really wanted to emphasize the significance of science there. So he even added on in support of an effective science program. That just showcased the level of engagement that these agencies have when it comes to science and what the committee provided as a venue to create that discussion. Most notable, however, was the frustration around the lack of adequate funding to meet the numerous water management and restoration challenges that came up multiple times throughout the meeting. It was very important to recognize the limitations of a lot of the agencies in terms of their efforts because of funding issues. So it was important to raise this as what you would consider a mega policy issue to further deliberate within this venue. Yet there was also a collective acknowledgement that around that very table there is adequate authority to get things done. The council was very conscientious about which agencies they wanted to initiate this committee with, and those agencies do hold a majority of the responsibility for implementing the Delta Plan, along with their other respective plans. And this does, through that statement, just does acknowledge that we are initiating a very good collaborative effort. On behalf of their respective agencies, committee members agreed on the following: to keep attention on the Delta and its future with respect to the co-equal goals through this forum and in support of immediate demands of the drought. That this venue is valuable for high-level discussions of specific challenges, or as the phrase that was coined that day, mega policy issues in water and ecosystem management, agency coordination, and effective multi-plan implementation. And this included, again, financing, but also levees, habitat restoration. There was a discussion about defining the parameters of adaptive management and the need for understanding, having a consistent understanding of that among all agencies. Water storage, in particular focus on groundwater as well, among many other issues. These were all determined as appropriate for further discussions by this group, noting that this group meeting twice a year could only raise maybe 2 to 3 issues to really delve into and roll their sleeves up on. It was important that they also noted coordination is key to their effectiveness, particularly with respect to financing their efforts. They also decided to benefit the Delta through maintaining accountability through this semi-annual process. So they viewed this as about a 6-month check-in on their implementation efforts. Not only, again, implementation of the Delta Plan, but how these 3 plans intersected. And so we would be using this venue, not only that, but the monthly meetings of the council to discuss their progress. And also they chose to ensure that this committee concept enhances existing efforts. So it was critical that this would not be an additional layer, but one that simply raised primary issues of high-level discussion that needed to happen, and not to be redundant in any shape or form. So therefore, this committee would work to align the agency priorities in the Delta with respect to all of those plans. Also, they chose, and in many respects, most importantly for staff purposes, to dedicate key staff to work with the council staff to orchestrate and coordinate implementation of their respective plans. That was the main objective in terms of the chair getting agreement around the room, that we can move forward now with acknowledgement of the purposes of this committee. And importantly, in the near term, each agency will review its priorities and Delta Plan responsibilities and work with council staff to determine and fine-tune the points of intersection here of these issues that were raised. So over the next 6 months, working even more closely with these agencies, council staff aims to merge individual agency top priorities into coordinated action that will support increased science integration and implement the Delta-specific aspects of the state and federal plans. Now that I've gone through kind of the boring part of the written, I'd like to make a few comments. One is that this effort was a group effort, particularly through the staff. I wanted to thank the Delta Stewardship Council staff. Every single division was an integral part of pulling and all aspects of this program together through presentations, through materials, and also through utilizing their good relationships with these other agencies to increase the engagement that we had from these other agencies. As well, I would like to then again also thank all of those state and federal agencies that chose to take their time. That morning, we did have a 3.5-hour agenda, but it was succinctly, through the succinct leadership of our chairman, condensed into a little under 3 hours, for the simple fact that most of those agencies present had to go out and make an announcement of already existing coordinated efforts, they were announcing a long-term drought operations plan, and it was a very important release of information. And so Chair Fiorini was able to make everything work and really condense that agenda. A couple of things. You may notice that before you there is a pen that we have placed before you. It says One Delta, One Science. This was an important little bit of levity that we added to the meeting. And the reason was, first off, no state funds were used for this. Staff used their own resources. But it was an important concept that was discussed not only at this committee meeting, but also will continue as a priority of the Delta Stewardship Council. And so this was a little takeaway to keep those messages alive and well once they left the meeting. But also in talking about the intersection of all these plans, it was important to note that not only did the Delta plan involve a lot of other plans in its creation, but so did the other two plans that were discussed. So we we allowed them to have a little takeaway. This is a little placemat where we use the Water Education Foundation's great, if you will, display of all of the different plans that went into creating the Delta plan. And so it was important to give our representatives a visual of everything, how comprehensive the Delta plan was. And just in case they forgot what the Delta looked like, we had the map of the Delta here on the back side. It received rave reviews. What I'd like to do is thank the council particularly for their leadership as well, because this has been a long endeavor, but we will have a lot of things to come in the next 6 months, a lot of activity. To use the words of Chuck Bonham, the agencies are interested in taking action now, so that is where we are headed. Thank you very much for your time on that.
Taryn, thank you, and thank you for your leadership. Any questions or comments of Taryn? Gloria?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Taryn, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your report. It was very thorough, and the fact that the implementation committee is moving forward, and it's good to hear that you're receiving cooperation from all those agencies that really have jurisdiction in the Delta, and that's a real key part, and certainly to Randy's leadership in terms of bringing folks together. So that is very good news. I think implementation committee is a very important part of what we're doing now as part of the plan. And so I just want to compliment the fact that you and Randy and those agencies all involved and people who are involved that really will make the difference moving forward with the Delta plan. So thank you so much this morning, and Randy, and those agencies that are part of it.
Judge, and then Bruce Stoller.
Well, a couple comments and a question. I was one of the attendees, and Pat was there, and Phil, and many staff were at the meeting, and maybe many of you were at the meeting. But I was very taken by the fact that the Stewardship Council, and particularly Randy, was front and center on this issue, on all these issues. For the first time, I've never seen this. Well, this is a first, I guess. But the point I'm making is that I think it was a very helpful meeting in terms of educating even agency heads about the council and what has been done, what we have done, and what the staff has done, and what we look forward to, particularly in the science area, no question about that. But it was very interesting to see the reaction of various agency heads, who many of whom for the first time really got into the Delta plan. And that's very important. Second, however, I have a question about, toward the end of the meeting we were talking, the agency heads were talking about mega issues. Now, have we decided, actually I have two questions. Have we decided what are the 2 or 3 mega issues? Maybe this is something Randy would respond to, but Taryn, if you can. What are the mega issues was there consensus on those mega issues? And if so, what are they that are going to be the subject of the interagency activities between now and the next meeting?
Thank you, Judge. The mega issues that were discussed, that were raised, were greater than 2 or 3. So I'll just review those, but we did a few raised to we were able to pull as our priority. Levies, clearly through the interagency activity spearheaded through the Council's levy investment strategy and assessment strategy, that we will be moving forward. And so the levies really became a main mega policy issue to discuss. Yes?
Well, my impression was that the agency heads, however, had a different view of what would be. They understood levies, but I thought there were larger issues that they had to finance. They're all sitting there for the first time together talking
Right.
about this. I'm not to say levies aren't important, but my impression was they had larger issues in mind that would be more comprehensive than just even levies. Did I misunderstand them?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. So please let me elaborate then, and obviously the chairman can join in. But financing was a key. And one of the discussions that you would have heard about financing and just that frustration that there is not enough adequate funding for a lot of these efforts was that the chairman did point out that Chapter 8 of the Delta Plan does have us looking at pursuing a financing plan that is not yet underway, but it showed a perfect venue through this committee, that interest in financing, and that the council through the Delta Plan already had in mind a financing plan effort. And I can't elaborate on that because it's a little vague for me, so please excuse that. But yes, financing would be key, and I don't know if the chair would like to elaborate on the financing portion.
Not just financing, but there was several.
Sure.
Well, we targeted finance, levies, and restoration as the 3 big ones,
Right.
and then there were a few that fell out. But I'd just like to say that levy is a 5-letter word, but it ultimately is the biggest issue in the Delta. It is the biggest issue in the Delta. And finding consensus on how to wisely invest to protect the cities and the businesses, the people that live there, and agriculture is a problem that has frustrated leadership in California for many decades. And the thought of getting some semblance of agreement around how to best approach the future of levee maintenance and improvements in the Delta is significant. It is a big issue. So that whatever work we do in the next 6 months to help highlight that again in November when the committee meets will be a big step forward, I believe. But again, as Taryn mentioned, there is a great deal of frustration about the lack of consistent funding for a number of the things that each of these agencies has responsibilities to do. So that's something that we will all be looking into and figuring out ways to help secure more consistent funding. And then around restoration, there's a consensus that there is a huge demand to create more shallow water habitat and marshland, additional food supply, protection for fish. And progress on that has been very, very slow. But there is the potential to do a lot more at a quicker pace, and so that will be the focus, is how we can step up the progress toward doing the things that most everyone agrees needs to be done. That's actually, those 3 items in themselves will be probably a lifetime achievement to accomplish.
Can I, one final thought or question? Obviously, the key now is what takes place between the meeting and the next meeting. And are we going to be able to monitor or kind of stay with? I know you got limited resources, but I think you did. By the way, you did a terrific job, obviously, with other staff, of other agencies. How is that going to happen? That we can coordinate their efforts with our goals.
Yes. So by choosing to strategically draw the commonalities or common thread between the 3 existing plans and trying to find the nexus of how they all fit, it was to show that there are already intentions by these agencies to move forward with specific efforts. And there's a lot of overlap, even though I don't want to use that word because everyone's coming from a different perspective. But what we know is that through the Natural Resources Agency, there is an effort to work on an implementation plan for their California State Water Action Plan, just as we are working on our implementation plan for the Delta Plan. So just between those two agencies, our agency and resources, we will be working to better coordinate on the Delta-specific portions of that. So as that implementation effort is underway, we will be coordinating. So we'll be able to streamline and be more efficient in the level of energy that's going into and the resources that are going into this. So there is that. In addition, with the agreement that each of these agencies would dedicate a key staff person to work, or people, staff members, to work with our council staff. By the very nature of that, we will be better integrating what the priorities are and where we can work most closely together and be most effective. So I would look at the next 3 months as being the first phase where we'd be connecting with all of those agencies. The level of outreach that needs to take place obviously does take some staff resources, but now that we have the committee behind this, it'll be a little easier to generate that. And so the agencies have acknowledged their commitment to this, so it will be easier to get the information. So not only would it be their top priorities in terms of their plan implementation, but also through their Delta plan responsibilities. So it's about tying those all together. So I envision the next 3 months being more coordinated and having that we'll pull together, we'll compile, if you will, all of this information and then make a determination as to the best use of the venue.
Just a practical overview,
sure.
I might give some examples of things that we have anticipated doing over the coming months. On the finance side of things, we're in the process of repurposing the software we've been using to gather information about agencies' expenditures on old CalFed-related strategies. Now we'll be able to redeploy that so we can build a solid understanding of what funds are being spent on what now. That's the first step we've always identified, is how we would build a finance plan, and that'll allow us to report back by the fall to the executive levels rather than just kind of the staff level folks that we've been working at in the past. Here's the dollars that are available. Be able to see what's covered, where we've got gaps in our funding, and then think of how we can move it ahead. And, of course, the water bond around which the administration is engaging, and discussions that are happening outside of the government now through the PPIC and other discussions about water finance are an important part of that. On the levy side, as we begin our contract work, we're going to create both the technical committee that many agencies came up after the presentations we had at the implementation committee meeting, said, I want my staff to be on that. Mm-hmm. Bureau of Reclamation came and said, hey, we need to be involved in that. We're already obviously working with the Flood Board and the Protection Commission and DWR on that, and the Corps will be engaged. We found key people through these conversations at the Corps we hadn't been aware of who could provide technical expertise to us and ways to move it ahead. And then I think on the restoration side, there already is a lot of interagency cooperation going on. And, of course, we had our white paper we've shared with you a couple times. As we finish that, I think that's going to outline ways that our agencies can work together to focus attention. You know, a lot of the cooperation is occurring at the staff level, and the advantage we've got now is being able to work together with senior executives as well to break through some of the barriers that are impeding the effective staff work. So I think, you know, there's some very practical things that we'll be able to do in the next few months to move this from the conversation we had a month ago to some real engagement with the agencies that are at the table.
And if I may as well, the interim
I'm going to interject that we might want to delay some of this discussion for next month because we've got quite a few people here lined up for panels. Some are going to have to leave at 1 o'clock. So go ahead and complete your response, but we're running out of time for this.
Certainly. Just one takeaway as well with respect to science was an acknowledgement of the interim science action agenda, which will not require, but where our science program is reaching out to these other agencies to engage on making a more effective science action agenda, and the interim is the two-year program. So May 6th, they're having a meeting where they're going to get this information, where they're going to have an exchange. And so by raising that issue on the 9th of April, we got this now on the radar of these agencies, which have already said that they want to be more engaged on science, and that the Delta Science Program is a critical component to agency coordination. And so that was another objective that was met. So science is going to be a key throughout the next 6 months, and we'll be looking at multiple ways to engage them on that.
Great. Larry, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, but since we're in a time constraint here, the judge asked several of my questions. I just had one. When is the next date?
Of this meeting? Of
when
the committee?
Will you meet again in the fall?
The chairman announced at the meeting sometime in the beginning of November, likely after the election.
Smart. That's kind of where I was headed on that. Second of all,
thank you.
Second of all, it kind of goes to what the judge, and I think Hank would have also kind of zeroed in on. What's the action plan? What's expected, and what's the timing that we could expect to kind of see these milestones met? Because when you're 6 months out, it's like when you write a term paper. You got 6 months to write the term paper. You don't write that thing till the night before. And so this stuff's too important to screw around for 6 months. So it's imperative that we have those milestones and set up, and that the agenda and that the folks involved continue to send people that are involved and also can make decisions. Now that's just what I quickly said.
If I may, and thank you very much, and you are correct. The greatest thing that we could ask for was the acknowledgement of the importance of moving forward through this committee venue. So those agencies have agreed to dedicate their staff to work with us to create those priorities. So within the next 2 to 3 months, that work will help move forward and create milestones. And I will be happily reporting to the council as we move forward. So I will keep you up to date on that level of activity. And also the council, too, can provide me with that input of where they would like to see this go as well. If I just may make one more acknowledgement, it was a public meeting and we had only one public comment, but I just wanted to say that it was a very good comment for the group of people that were present, the high-level agency heads that were around the table. We were talking at a very big mega policy level, and the public comment was to acknowledge and to remind these agency heads that the Delta is in fact a place where many people live, and to keep that in mind, and they all did hear that. So it was, I just wanted to make that note.
Taryn, thank you very much for that report, and thank you, council members, for the discussion. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you to our staff for a great start to this process. That concludes file item 6B. Dan, can you quickly cover file item 6C, contracts
there's
update?
nothing extraordinary to report. That's just an issue. That's just a listing of the contracts that are presently in place. We've done nothing in the last quarter that would require your approval on the contracts world, so we're in good shape there.
Any questions of Dan on that matter? Then with my colleagues' agreement, I'm going to delay file item 7, the lead scientist report, until the end of our meeting today so that we can move forward with the first of 3 panels dealing with storage. Is that everybody in agreement? All right, Kayvon?
Yeah, just by